Hello, Estelden here. Breath of the Wild. Game of the generation. It was the big E3 special the year it was announced. It came out, the reviewers said it was the best thing ever, like they do with absolutely every Zelda game and pretty much every Nintendo game for that matter, at least in the last sort of decade or so. It seems that anything they touch turns to gold, even if they're working with Tencent on a Pokemon game. None of that matters, does it? Because Breath of the Wild came about. Everyone thought it was pretty damn special. I thought it's easily my least favourite 3D Zelda. And I'm going to go a step further. I think it's utter trash. I think it was a disgrace to the Zelda name. I was completely mortified when I played through it because I'm like, fuck, everyone saying that they love this game. This is what it's going to be for the next decade at least. To me, it was an embarrassment. It was a cookie-cutter attempt to clone other games that had come out a few years before. Skyrim, to name one of them. I mean, the development timeline's up. It started development right after Skyward Sword, and what else came out that year? Skyrim. It's trying to emulate fucking Skyrim, a game that they would let you play with your own penis as a control method if it meant they could sell a few more copies. That's the game they're emulating. A series that's meant to have the most integrity, perhaps, of any Nintendo game that goes out there. Even Mario. I mean, they allow Paper Mario. Do they allow Paper Link? Well, they do allow like the chibi little, I don't know, whatever it is that they did in Link's Awakening, but that was about it. And that's another thing that really, really just fucking bugged me out because Breath of the Wild released, and I thought, for fuck's sake, man, we're now going to get these cookie-cutter carbon copies for a long time now because it's sold so well and everyone apparently loves it. And I thought, well, they promised that when it came to the Nintendo Switch, that they would release double the games. We get all the 3DS teams working on different titles for the Switch. We get the 3D teams as well. We get double the games. Fantastic. This is going to be incredible. And then the reality hit that wasn't the case. Because the handheld teams, I don't know what they were doing. Were they helping out the mobile teams? That's all I can think of. What else have they been doing? Because the games haven't been coming out on Switch. I mean, we really haven't had that much in comparison to, I would say, even the Wii U. There's been some really good games, sure, but the frequency hasn't really been there. So when I was hit with the reality that we were not only no longer going to be getting traditional 3D Zeldas, instead of getting a proper 2D Zelda, we got fucking Link's Awakening. A remake of like a 20-year-old game, and cool, but if you're a hardcore fan and you're disappointed with Breath of the Wild, why are you suddenly going to be happy with a fucking graphical remake for $60 fucking? You're not. But that's what we got, and I think I wouldn't really be doing it justice if I didn't explain why I didn't like Breath of the Wild. It's good and well to bang on, but I've got to at least give some talking points, or I'm just pulling stuff out of my ass. So why don't I like Breath of the Wild? To start off with, a lot of games now will give the open world promise, where they will say, you can do absolutely anything. It started again, Skyrim. We come back to Skyrim. You can climb that mountain, see? You can do anything. There was all of that talk. But what tends to happen in modern open world games is it becomes, we're not going to bother making the content. We're just going to give you a little bit of a play box, a sandbox. Here it is. Make your own fun. And then tell us how fucking good it is. Go to Metacritic. Give it a 10 out of 10. And no one's ever reviewing the actual content anymore. We don't look and say, gee, that was a fantastic dungeon. There was incredible level design there. They just become buzzwords because no one's going to articulate what they actually like about what's going on. It's just a big wank off about why people found this particular bit absolutely captivating. This part was especially stunning. There's no why. And I want to today explain why. Why I dislike this game. So it starts out there, you come out of the initial cave, there's the big open world, and I've got to say, the start of the game is probably where I liked it most, because it felt a little bit more tightly designed. It wasn't too big, that initial tutorial area, we could probably call it. But what happens is, once you get planted into the overworld, that's when the wheels fall off. Everything looks the same. The grassy kind of world, that takes up far too much of the game, and sure, there's the usual suspects. You get the desert, you get a bit of a hotter zone, you get the whole icy area and everything too, but the gameplay loop around that is pretty much the same. It's just the color palette that kind of changes, and that's a pattern I've seen in a lot of open world games. You can do pretty much the same thing in any setting, You can market it as being a totally different experience, but it's just the same fucking package. All you've changed is the packaging that goes around it. So to get back to the design in detail, you go around this world doing a lot of the same things. The only real objective you've got is that you're going to go around and find shrines. Sure, you can go to the final boss, but as a lot of people have kind of mentioned if they dig deep into it, it's not really designed for you to actually do that. So, speaking how they have actually wanted you to go about this, you're going to go around looking for shrines, and you'll find some really interesting things on the way. Will you find awesome secrets like pieces of heart, stamina upgrades in the world that are going to help you out and give you rewards for exploring? No, you're going to find Korok seeds. Really kind of meaningless garbage that gets old within the first 50, let alone the first 700. Absolutely ridiculous that that's all they could come up with. So you're gonna maybe find a few of them in your travels, but otherwise you're just going to be turning over rocks. You're going to be fighting the same generic enemies over and over. I think when things get a bit more powerful, because there is actually a hidden level scaling mechanic in the game. So as you kind of get better equipment and you get a bit more powerful with your stamina buffs and your heart pieces, then the enemies will scale around, but you won't really get actual different enemies that add variety. You'll just get the same ones that are recolored, and they look a little bit different, but it's the same ones, and they get really, really old. There's not a lot of variety in the game. If I showed you like 100 screenshots of one area and then I showed you 100 of another, and it was in the same grassy bit, you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference. You could only tell the difference if the color palette changed when you went to the snow, for example. The actual individual areas are really not very different. So if you want to play this game efficiently, and I'll say in games like this I'm a bit of an efficient person, and you can probably say they're not made for me, fine, I'll accept that criticism. Maybe they're not, but I'm still going to look at it the same way. So I feel my criticism's valid, because the most efficient way to play this open world game, where you're just looking around for shrines, there's really nothing else going on that's not make your own fun. You're just going to climb the towers. And I think I've got the tab open, but as Jim Sterling, who I kind of agree with, this is obviously a very old review now, but when it came out, I thought, this guy is fucking spot on. I do not always agree with him, but in this case, I did, and I was wowed that he was the only person willing to go out and say, Jesus fucking Christ. He says the same thing. There's these towers that you climb, and you're just pretty much looking for them. So you have to go on a big old stroll looking for them. You find the same stables over and over. There's a lot of kind of copy and paste, it almost feels like, where, oh, there's something new. Oh, it's another fucking stable. So it's nothing interesting. It's not like a unique landmark. It's just more of the same. Oh, I found a town in the desert. Almost all of the NPCs are completely lacking a personality. There's maybe one or two with a quest icon. Are we playing an MMO Zelda? No, apparently this is the next big traditional 3D one. Doesn't feel like it. So you climb these towers, and you climb up, and then you can glide wherever you want to. So suddenly the world's a complete waste of time, because the most efficient way to traverse the world is just to glide around looking for the shrines. And that's exactly what I did. And you can turn around and say, oh no, it's not meant to be played like that. You're meant to just, you're meant to make your own fun and immerse yourself. The game is meant to kind of pull me in naturally to do that. So if I'm finding a more efficient way to go about it, that's a failure in design. I've played a lot of games where they have a design kind of theory in mind of how they want to do it, but they present it in a way that's not really intrusive. It pushes you in. And these are some older games, man. A lot of people who've played Breath of the Wild probably wouldn't have gone that far back, and that's where I think the problem is. A lot of people play this, they think it's the most innovative thing ever, but if you actually take a step back, look at what people were doing in the early 2000s when it came to open world games, one of my personal favourites, the Gothic series, they do it far better than this, because they approach open world design in the right way, and I will come back to that a little bit later on. The next problem I had was the weapon durability system. A lot of people say this was expert design because it forced you to keep having to look around for different weapons and actually kind of explore and engage. But I didn't find that at all, because again, the efficiency from games I've played in the past in my head, I could kind of see that this was again a waste of time. The problem with Breath of the Wild is it's set up to be a role-playing game, but it's not, because Nintendo didn't want to go that far. They wanted to emulate Skyrim to some degree, because that was the popular thing at the time, and that means it's going to sell, and we're not going to be seen as outdated like we were with Skyward Sword. But they didn't go far enough in some cases. They went like halfway. And that was the problem. Because they went halfway, it meant they went nowhere. You can't do that. You can't sort of half cross a bridge and then say you got to the destination. You didn't do it. You created something half-baked. And the way that works is because that you're collecting these different weapons, but you're not actually getting stats, you're not getting XP, you're not making progress, it means you've got no reason to actually kill enemies. So where this falls apart with weapon durability is if I pick up a whole bunch of weapons, and I know that if I start hitting things and I start fighting enemies, they're going to break, why am I going to fight these fucking enemies? My weapons are going to break, and then I'm going to have to go find other ones. I don't want to do that. I'm already on a fucking wild goose chase looking for these damn shrines. Why would I want to do the same thing with weapons as well, for the reward of killing stuff, to then do that gameplay loop all over again? It makes no fucking sense. And I don't understand how this didn't occur to them when they were actually developing this thing. Again, people will say, but it's fun to kill things, that's why we do it. No. Fuck no. I'm here for the content. I want to play the good content where I will happily take the water temple over these fucking shrines and these awful half-assed dungeons where, you know, they kind of rush them at the last minute to get the thing out and say, yep, we've got all the traditional Zelda features, plus we've got the open world, this is like Skyrim, you could cook, all of this. They just sort of shoved it all in together, and the elements don't feel full-fledged because of it. It's a system that doesn't work. And I haven't really gone into Breath of the Wild 2, but they cannot take this system because it's absolute garbage. And anyone who really boils down the system can see the same thing. One thing I don't agree with Jim Sterling on is he says in his review that weapon durability is always garbage. I don't agree. It works perfectly in an RPG. It doesn't work in Zelda because it's not an RPG. And like I said, they didn't go far enough. It's not an RPG. The game, it's trying to be one, but it doesn't go that far over, and that's why it fails. Because there's no reason to kill enemies. If they gave you a reason to kill enemies, then it would work in some ways, because you'd be gaining power as you go along. But the only way you gain power is by doing the shrines, which has nothing to do with actually going out in the world and killing enemies. So you understand what I'm saying. Yes, you still pick up the weapons, you'll still find upgrades, but it doesn't mean you need to kill enemies. They'll rarely have anything good on them. I mean, they carry those awful, cumbersome clubs that are completely useless and unpractical. You don't need them. And there's the issue of the Master Sword as well, which you can find pretty damn easily if you look into it. And again, people say, oh, if you looked at a walkthrough, then you've got no right to criticize it. But again, it's just efficiency. People are going to fucking do this. When I played Ocarina of Time in 97, 98, whenever it was, they sold me the fucking strategy guide. So don't tell me that I shouldn't be looking at walkthroughs. You used to make a fucking profit off this. Now the shrines, probably the only part of the game I liked, because they were really, aside from the mini dungeons I would call them, they're certainly not full-fledged dungeons. The shrines are probably the only traditional Zelda feeling parts of the game. And they all look the fucking same, like they really didn't get any love. It's like they had 90% of the team, or at least the art team, working on the open world, trying to make it beautiful, making it all the hype in the trailers and at E3 and everything. But the shrines, the same fucking colour palette in every single one of them. And in all of them use those 4 fantastic items that are, every single puzzle just becomes a game of, okay, which item am I going to use this time? I don't find any actual outstanding, interesting items out in the world. It's always just going to be this 4. So they're fun. I did get enjoyment out of doing the shrines, but it's not worth the hassle of tracking them all down. I have to go through that cumbersome matter of actually finding them out in the world, and so many times I just wanted to throw in the towel and just Google, yep, where are the fucking shrines at? Let me just go to each of them, let me do that, then I can say I finished the content, I'm done with this game. I didn't want to do that though, because I was desperate to figure out why people were saying this game was outstanding. I thought I had to be missing something. So I kept trudging along. I think I've maybe found about 60 or 70 of the shrines. Possibly more by now, I just can't remember. It's hard to pick the damn thing up and actually play through it because it is mind-numbing, man. It's not good. And the shrines, they're not worth the hassle. They're okay, but I would say the game would be better if it was like Zelda, mini puzzle, the game. And you just got one shrine after another, and it was like Portal or something, where you just kept going into like a new little thing each time you completed the last puzzle. I would say that would be more enjoyable than Breath of the Wild, where I had this open hub to actually track down the only parts of the game where I'm going to get real upgrades. It's a real joke. That's what it came to, all because they wanted to copy games like Skyrim. And then you've got the music. Music, it's absolutely deplorable compared to what we've had in the past. Ocarina of Time, I'm still humming Gerudo Valley and everything you play on the ocarina itself. Zelda's Lullaby, the Forest Temple theme, all these nostalgic tracks. And then you get Breath of the Wild, it's so ambient. It's forgettable is what it is. Yeah, look, I'll say occasionally I hear a few good notes here and there, and I think, but that's not going to stick with me. In 5-10 years' time, I don't think kids are going to remember those 3 notes and think, that was, take me back. The music was not there. It was there in Mario Odyssey. New Donk City, fantastic theme. It brought me back to the 64 days. They didn't get it right with Breath of the Wild. Hasn't got any good music. It's, again, they missed the mark completely. Ambience is fine in places, but the whole game is ambient, and it only suits the game because the game is fucking empty. And using that as an excuse for not putting in any real content apart from the shrines and the odd puzzle you might find, not good enough. Not good enough by Zelda standards, where it used to be like one of the best series ever. And now it's I'd probably put it like slightly above Ubisoft games. And then you got the busy work again. As I mentioned before, anytime you find a stable, fantastic. Which generic quest am I going to find this time? Certainly nothing interesting. I'm not going to pick up any good cosmetics because all the fucking cosmetics were tied to the amiibo system. That's what we got now. That was Nintendo trying to be sneaky with DLC. We've got no microtransactions because you got to buy them at the game store. We can put the extra cost onto the game store and say they're the ones who are selling it. There's no microtransactions in Breath of the Wild, but there's no interesting rewards either, because they couldn't reward anything cool because the cosmetics, they were already gone. The art team put them to work and they went into these little figurines. What a damn shame. So there's no reason to do any of the quests, because once you've done one, you've done them all. And before I go into why I think Breath of the Wild 2 needs to change things and how I feel they can actually do it, I want to say that I'm not just shitting on any sort of single Nintendo game. I love Nintendo. They're still probably the last big publisher and developer in the AAA space where I think they've still got it to some degree. They're making mistakes, but I still get some brilliance out of them. Mario Odyssey, fucking fantastic. That was a winner. We got Paper Mario, another winner. I even liked Yoshi's Crafted World. That was a good one. Snipper Clips and all the rest. There's a lot of good stuff that goes on with Nintendo. So when it comes to Breath of the Wild 2, I want to see big sweeping changes. The first thing I want to see is I want them to make almost a joke of the open world style system by having it there. I know there's nothing we can do. It's probably going to be set in the same map, but I want like the villains to be some sort of ancient species of some kind. Maybe it can be tied to Ganon. I don't know, but where they come down and they have like these big walls or something that actually separate everything apart. And now it's up to Zelda or Link or whoever we play as. I'm sure they're going to pull something shifty there. We go around and we have to open up the world again so everything can just be as one and it can be like it used to be and things can get back to normal. What that will allow them to do from a gameplay perspective is actually design these areas so they feel unique, not just empty generic fields where I can ride a horse around but it's completely inefficient because I can fucking glide everywhere. That'd be a really good start. And what I think they need to do as well is actually look back at Skyward Sword and say, this was not a shit game. I actually really like Skyward Sword. I think that the idea of making the areas everything a puzzle in itself, I think it was well intentioned. They just got the balance wrong because for whatever reason the game, it was either rushed or they ran into a lot of problems trying to design it. And what it meant is there just weren't enough areas. We got 3 proper areas and then we had to keep revisiting them and then it felt really boring. Instead of just the 3 kind of samey, I think it was the sandy area, like the grassy area, and there was like one other one as well, I think. It didn't feel that different to the 3rd area. I think it was still kind of rocky and everything too. So instead of that, instead of going back to these same areas, if we had like a shadowy kind of area, like in Ocarina of Time, with the Shadow Temple and the old creepy graveyard, something like that. If we got a real underwater area in there too, and maybe something a little bit creepy and spiritual, again, like the Spirit Temple. So, you can see what I'm doing. I'm taking all the good ideas from Ocarina of Time, but that game, A Link to the Past, was when I believe Zelda was at its best, and they keep going backwards by trying to have all these gimmicky features. In Twilight Princess, it was the damn dog. In Skyward Sword, it was the motion controls, and maybe that's what held up all of the development. In the handheld games, I barely want to go into it. They were fucking around with that stylus on DS, and Link Between Worlds, they were so hung up on maybe Breath of the Wild Light by letting you visit all the dungeons in any order, that it compromised the design and stopped them from making anything challenging. So they need to just stop the gimmicks and just come back for a second. Breath of the Wild 2, open world. Flip it on its head and split those areas up so they can actually hand design them and make them really interesting. You can still have open areas. I'm not against open in Zelda, but what I want them to do is actually look at good open world games and what they did best. Now, Gothic, the series I mentioned before, I know probably not many people have played it, so I'm going to explain it really simply. What they did in open world is the open world was actually a little bit like a puzzle in itself. Because there were easy enemies and really hard enemies that you couldn't beat until you upgraded your weapons. So Zelda, it doesn't need to become an RPG. You can still have weapons you find as you go along that do a whole lot more damage. That's fine. So they can do what they do in Gothic, which is you go around and you'll find these weaker enemies, but you'll also occasionally bump into hard enemies, and you won't be able to kill them. They will fuck you up unless you're an absolute expert of the combat system, and you'll know to yourself, right, I can't go this way, that's where the hard enemies are, so I need to keep finding these little open areas with the easy enemies, kill those, find new items, find things that might be able to help upgrade my character, and then eventually I'll be able to tackle the hard enemies. So it's about picking your battles. You go around, you go area to area kind of looking for what's a bit weaker to get through, and then when you get through the area and you get a bit stronger, right, I remember that area where there were a few stronger enemies. They weren't too strong, but they were just a little bit too much for me. So you go back to then, and then you fuck shit up, and you get through the area, and it feels really satisfying because you feel like you're really making progress and you're slowly expanding the map. It's not a case of, yep, I can just go anywhere, I can go anywhere I want, all the enemies, the same power level, any shrine I find, same kind of average level of difficulty, there's nothing here that's going to be too hard for me, and I'm going to have to come back later, I'm going to have to get stronger. Because there's none of that in Breath of the Wild. Gothic gets the balance perfect, and I encourage anyone to check it out if you think Breath of the Wild's incredible, because you'll play this game, and I guarantee, even if you like both of the games, you'll at least have a new side to it, and you might understand what I'm kind of getting at with that. When it comes to the weapon durability, I think they should just scrap the system, because Zelda's not an RPG, and it simply doesn't work. I think they need to have a less is more approach, so instead of having just a million weapons scattered around the map and be expected to collect a whole bunch of them and then just carry them around, use them for maybe half a fight and then have to get rid of it. What they should do instead is have more mini dungeons where if you get to the end, that's when you'll find an awesome weapon, and maybe that weapon type will be fantastic for a certain type of dungeon, maybe a bit weaker in others, and that way it can encourage you to mix and match a bit more, and you feel rewarded for doing a piece of hand-built content. I would much rather have actual mini dungeons than just shrines, which are one puzzle, get in, get out, move on. So I want some real variety when it comes to the design and the length. So I do still want maybe a dungeon where you go in, it's like a shrine, it's one puzzle, but I want to go into another one and it's more of like a mini gauntlet, it takes me a bit longer. I don't want everything to be the same. Because then it turns theme parky, like in Breath of the Wild, where why is it that every single fucking shrine is just along those same lines where I do one task and I get out? It doesn't make sense in a world. So make it a bit different. You want to emulate Skyrim, as much as I think Skyrim can be a bit fucking mediocre sometimes, at least the dungeons do have a bit of variety. Some of them are a bit longer, they have sub-areas and they can go on and you might actually feel at the end, oh, I might actually get something epic here. This took a really, really fucking long time. No, I just got another level scaled, randomly generated item. Fantastic. So stay away from that, Zelda. Actually have those hand-placed areas and items that we find. And then get back to the music. There's no reason to have more ambience, because perhaps in this particular take on the world, things have changed. You saved the world back in the first game, now things are looking a bit better, so we can have the music back again. Make it fucking epic. Go back to Ocarina of Time. Go back to even Skyward Sword, that had some great music as well. They're the games they should be looking to emulate in the music department. Bring that back. So I'll tell you what, series with great music, they're the ones that stick with you. For series like, I look at movie franchises and you think of something like Harry Potter, Star Wars. That music stays with you, even if you haven't watched the movies in a decade, or in Star Wars case, you don't plan to possibly ever again. The music sticks with you. And that's what they need to focus on. They need to focus on creating those memories organically, not telling you to have your fun, and that if you can't make it yourself, that there's something wrong with you and the game's not for you. Create the content. If you want to have some sandboxy stuff as well, fantastic. But the actual handmade content should be the actual draw of the game, and where there's no question or divide on the quality of it. Because when you say make your own fun, there's plenty of people who can go and play sticks outside and have a great time. That's fantastic. Are we going to charge people $100 to do it? Probably not. Then you'll start to sort of question the value proposition, and that's how I felt with Breath of the Wild. There's something interesting I read, and that's what actually sparked my fears, and where I thought, I don't know. It's from Tech Radar, and there's apparently a guy who's been pretty good with the rumours, Tyler McVicker, and according to him, Breath of the Wild 2 will take players back to the same Hyrule layout, but introduces new things like miasma-like corruption and dungeons to add depth and detail to the map. So when they say dungeons, hopefully that means there's more than just a few more shrines, that they can actually add that variety. And then they'll take inspiration from Red Dead Redemption 2. When I saw that, that's where I flew off the handle a little bit, because that is a game it's fine as a cinematic experience. People seem to like that stuff nowadays, but as a video game, the gameplay, garbage as an open world kind of title, really no better than many, many others of recent times. They need to go back to what made Zelda what it was. It needs its identity. I don't like seeing Nintendo go around copying trends, because they used to be the trendsetters. Why isn't Zelda looking at the industry and going, there are so many fucking bog ordinary generic open world titles that I reckon we can get back to something maybe with a bit of kind of open-endedness to it, where you can make a few choices about where you go, sure, but something that's really well designed, because that's what we're fucking good at. Instead they go, nah, let's just copy what's going on in the market. That'll make the shareholders happy, and that'll make things a bit easier. Maybe we can reuse the world again in 3 years and put out another game. Fantastic. That seems to be the approach they've taken. So Breath of the Wild 2, really simple. Don't make it completely open world. Make it a little bit more structured, where you can still have your fun, make your own fun, but the guys who are actually here for the content, they can explore actual dungeons this time. There's not just 4 pretty easy ones that are along the same lines. Make it interesting. Make it varied. Don't do the same thing over and over. That's not what I want to be doing in a 100-hour plus game. Already done it with Skyrim, like I said. So do that. Great music, great atmosphere. Change up the actual level design as well. So instead of just fields and climbing the odd mountain and slipping down whenever it has Melbourne, Australia-like weather, that's where I'm from, by the way, don't make it like that, because then I'm just going to get frustrated where I slip down a mountain every 2 seconds and I can't actually do anything in your fucking game. Don't do that. Get rid of the weather system completely. Just maybe make it just like an atmosphere thing. Don't tie it into the gameplay. So that side of things, get rid of the weapon durability, or at least make it so there's less is more, less weapons, more high quality weapons that don't break. I can actually use them through a whole dungeon. And also the items. Bring the items back. Make them interesting. Make them really difficult to find, perhaps. Make them rewards for really tough dungeons and different things that you do in the world that are actual content. Don't just make them something generic you get at the start that you use all throughout the game. Because like in A Link Between Worlds, it is boring. I want to add to my arsenal. I don't want to just be renting items, and I don't want to use 4 items for the whole fucking game. That's not fun. That doesn't last 100 hours. It gets old. And lastly, the towns. I don't want to be picking up MMO quests. I want to be exploring lifelike areas. I mean, Kakariko Village, Hyrule Castle in Ocarina of Time. Those areas stay with me because every single character had personality. A lot of them had an overarching story because you saw them when you played as young Link. And then you came back as old Link and things had changed. You saw some development to these characters, and that actually helped you to kind of care about them and see what's going on. It gave you more motivation to do their side quests if they had them. I want you to take inspiration from the best side quest focused Zelda, which was Majora's Mask. Don't have characters with exclamation marks on their head, because that tells me that you don't think the town's actually worth exploring. There's no reason to talk to anyone if you're telling me the only notable characters. So be like Majora's Mask when it comes to the side quests. Take influence from your own fucking games, not from cookie cutter Bethesda. So I think if they can do all of that, which is probably a bit much to ask, because I'm pretty much asking them to take pretty much all of the core features of Breath of the Wild out of the game. Here it is, different game, Breath of the Wild 2. That might be a bit unrealistic, but at least meet me halfway. Put some more traditional Zelda stuff in there, because that's what I want to play. I want this series to continue to develop and be its own thing, its own identity. And Nintendo are already kind of falling in a lot of their areas when it comes to their mobile gaming. They've had games like Metroid Prime 4, which have been delayed because they keep trusting out-house studios, and Nintendo just didn't used to do that stuff. So I think a lot of their more recent decisions have not been very good. So please bring it back with Breath of the Wild 2. Give me that classic experience if you're not going to give me a damn proper 2D Zelda, or at least a new one. Make it something that maybe all of us can enjoy, so we get that traditional Zelda experience, a few open things as well, and then we can carry that forward. Whatever consoles be on the Switch, and we can have Zelda. Here's its identity. Here's what it does fantastically. We've done some new things. We've taken some old stuff as well. And now we've got the perfect package. Because I want them to keep learning, keep striving to do something fantastic. Don't rest on your laurels. Because the reviewers, they're just going to do the same thing every time. Your game's going to come out. Here it is. 10 out of 10. 93 on Metacritic. A year or so later, we didn't really like Skyward Sword. Because it was too linear, and I don't want to do puzzles the whole time. Why can't we be open? All right, Breath of the Wild, 97 on Metacritic. So the critics are they're fickle. They're not really to be taken seriously. They're going to call any Zelda game a 10 out of 10, and then they'll give you the real thoughts a few years later. I've seen it with Breath of the Wild because the reception hasn't been like the big echo chamber it was when it came out. People are starting to think, right, maybe this game, sure, it's great in many ways, but it's not the greatest game of all time like we thought. So Breath of the Wild 2, please make some changes. Don't just do the same thing and think that'll work and that'll move heaps of copies, because you'll lose Zelda's identity, and we don't want that. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you enjoyed the video, like, sub, leave a comment, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.